Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're going to talk about professional development. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. Ralph and I just scheduled our first backpacking trip, and so we're getting ready to do that about a week from now. And so we're going out for one night. We did like a preliminary car camping trip with our backpacking materials so that we could test them all out without actually being, a ways away from a car. So we did that. That all went well. So now we're going to do our first hike in, camp, sleep, hike out adventure.
Okay, cool. I'm excited. I think I have shared with you that I am not a camper. I don't know how to do it at all. And so...
We are very new to it ourselves.
If you could write me up a little booklet about how to do it, that would be great. Yeah, we just got, just recently our tent and our sleeping bags and stuff like that. And so we've tested them out once with the car camping adventure, and they all fit in our backpacks. And we did last weekend, we filled our backpacks not quite full and then just kind of walked around to test out if that was going to work out. So we've done all the preliminary tests, and now we're going to do an outing. Okay, I'm very excited. I want to hear a report back.
Okay, I'll report back.
That would be excellent. Okay.
How was your week?
My week was really good. I've been I think I'm getting more and more lessons from doing the distance learning thing with the kids.
Okay.
It's really interesting seeing my third grader, and they're doing like times tables. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting because they do a lot of, really conceptualizing what like 6 groups of 4 is and what 4 groups of 6 are, and all of that. And it's weird to like, at some point, memorization is just necessary. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm, and it's just really... I remember hearing a really interesting interview years ago about a math teacher who was super, super successful. And they were being asked, like, oh, do you do everything... I can't even remember, but it was all kind of like project-based. And, and she was like, no, at some point you have to do memorization. And the interviewer was like, but isn't that just bad? And they were like, no, because it's like vocabulary. Like... if every time you want to know what 6 times 4 is, you have to like visualize these groups, like at some point it needs to just be
really
there.
Slow you down, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have the quick translation. That makes sense.
Right. And so it's super interesting thinking about, I'm involved with a project that like talks about, it's relating math to disciplines that people use math in, and like how to kind of prepare students to carry their math stuff, say, into a physics class or a chemistry class, instead of, we just did that over there in math and I don't know how to bring it with me. And my role in it is a lot more like absorbing information, so like hearing about all this stuff. But it's just so interesting thinking about the balance in math between, at some point you need to be able to crank the thing and do the derivative. And really, like, it's so crucial to have that understanding of like how it works and everything, but you also need just the technical skills of being able to compute something. And and what's the balance between doing that, because like if people really connect with the understanding of why calculus and all that, but if they can't actually do the stuff, it's not super effective. And if they can only do the stuff with no connection, that's not effective. And so, anyway.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because it seems like we're moving so much as a community of academics towards, thinking about it and making sure we understand why we're learning it and all that, which is very important. But we need to remember that some of the other things like memorization sometimes are also very important and essential to mastering the skill. So I appreciate hearing that.
Right, because sometimes with physics problems, I'm like, if I can just explain it so well... And it doesn't really matter. They still need to do it 85 times themselves before it'll actually like connect with them. And I feel sort of almost bad sometimes when students are like, but how do I know which equation to use? And you're like, time. Like you just, with time and doing it a million times, you'll get like, oh, the last time I used this equation, it took me 3 pages. So I'll use this one and that's quicker and whatever. And it's so untangible for them, but it's the truth, right? Like sometimes
It
it's
really
just
is the answer, yeah.
building that sort of laying that groundwork. Anyway, so musings on third grade and how that relates to like
That's cool.
whatever. But yeah,
That's cool.
Yep. So tell me, you have a quote for us this week.
I do. It's from the book Everything is Figure Outable.
Oh, sweet. So you started it. Okay, cool.
I started it,
Awesome.
yes. So here we go. Whenever we feel like we already know something, our minds disengage and shut down. A destructive thought to watch out for is, I know this already. The next time you hear yourself thinking or saying, I know this already, immediately catch that thought and switch to a growth-minded question. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Ask it again and again with genuine curiosity. What can I learn from this? You can always learn one of two things. First, you can learn a new angle to a concept you're familiar with. Or more likely, you'll realize that you're not fully executing the thing you already know. You're not living it. Knowing something intellectually is very different from doing something consistently, mastering it, and benefiting from it.
Jeez, it's like we planned that.
I know.
It was like we had that set. That's amazing.
I want to say the second part, too. She says, a second destructive thought is, this won't work for me.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of saying, this won't work for me, which instantly shuts down the possibility of anything working, stop it, catch it, and change to a more productive question. Ask yourself, how can this work for me? So, there you go. I really appreciated that. Because it is so easy, and the reason I thought of this with professional development is often in professional development things I'm like, well, that doesn't apply to me. But just to remember, maybe it does. Let me be a little more creative here and actually think about how it might apply to me.
Dude, I feel like we could just do a whole episode about all of this stuff because
Totally.
It's so interesting, like from a teaching perspective. When I actually currently have 2 students who've had a high level of physics before. And one is like, ooh, yeah, I love physics. It's so great. I want to do more of this stuff. And how can I explain this in a good way? And, ooh, can I do another problem? And the other one's like, I've seen all this before, whatever. And it's so interesting to see that those people have the same knowledge and just the attitude. And it's one person is being tortured by having to sit through all this stuff all over again. And the other person is like, ooh, oh, I love this bit. This is great. And, just super getting so much out of it. So it's so different. But I'm guilty of that too, being like, I don't have time for this. I've already seen this. I don't need to do this. And
totally.
And then that rejection of things.
Yeah.
Like this.
And then that does guarantee that you're not actually going to get anything out of it. If you think,
totally,
isn't that funny? It's a self-fulfilling thought.
Right. And then sometimes it can be like a discomfort thing too. Like I don't know if I've shared this before, but the first time I went to a workshop on white fragility, and it was like, I was like being paid to be the person demonstrating white fragility because I was like, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I just got to America and I haven't done anything. And it was like really like when I like calmed down and like the facilitator was really helpful and they were like, no, it does. And they kind of got me to push through that. I was like, okay, it does. It totally does. But it was weird. Just that discomfort at first was making me be like, this doesn't apply to me. I don't want to do this. This isn't like, so yeah. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is professional development, Ruth? What do you consider it to be?
That's such a good question because I don't know if I've ever even really like expressed it, but it's just every opportunity we have to learn new things about how to do our job. That's think. Great. Or how do you, is that?
No, I totally agree.
Okay.
And it seems like sometimes, at least in our job where it's more focused on teaching, it seems like it's often about how to be better instructors and to better meet the needs of our students. But I believe it applies more broadly to also how to be better at research and service and whatever other aspects of our jobs there are. Developing professionally to be a better professional, Yes.
And it kind of, some of it I don't think I understood, because there is sort of that almost section on your CV or your tenure file where you kind of demonstrate that you're still doing professional development. And at first I was like, oh, is that what, I didn't quite understand how that related to doing workshops on active learning. And, I didn't quite understand that that's what that was. So yeah, I haven't always known what professional development was, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, me neither. So what's working for you with professional development?
So I love professional development and
great.
I'm always like,
how nice.
I know, I love it. I'm like such a joiner and I'm always like,
such a joiner. That's
I
cool.
get very overexcited about things, and I'm just like, oh yeah, sign me up. Like, we are doing this thing, and this is the new me. And like, I'm really into doing that. And I think that was not always the case. And
Okay.
I think especially when I started my job, I think, okay, so I don't like the tenure process in general.
Okay.
But I do think, I don't think I would have signed up for all the things because I'm busy and have two small
Right.
children. And so when I started this job, I was like, okay, I've got to like consciously say yes to all of these things. So I have stuff to show that I'm doing professional development, and like, do I want to fly across the country when I'm super sleep deprived with like a 1-year-old? No. But I need to put it in my tenure file. But then I went and it was the best experience I've ever had, like going to this workshop. So I think in some ways, sometimes getting kind of herded into doing something for like, not just for the sake of it, but just because like sort of mercenary, like fine, I'll put it in my tenure file. But then it turned out to be great. And so
Cool.
I kind of went through a period of excessive yeses to every professional development thing. So I think, I just find it really energizing and stimulating. I think, especially like in our university, it's been a really cool way to connect with people outside of just, my lovely colleagues, but like just there's other people in the university doing all these other cool things. And, that was kind of cool. And I think it's definitely one of those things that, like, if you did a cost benefit analysis, like it's definitely comes out totally worth it. Even like if you did sit through a whole thing and you were like, this is nothing to do with me and I don't like any of it, but that's a reflection, like that's you recognizing something about yourself. We are like, oh, I don't believe this at all. And, that is still information. So yeah, I love it.
Good point.
I do.
That's awesome.
I love, and I think I've spoken a lot on here before about the AAPT and the American Association of Physics Teachers, and everything I've done through them has just been worth like tenfold over, of the time I put in. So it's just super, super beneficial. So I'm all about it. And I think, but as a lecturer, I didn't have as much time and I didn't quite have the same
incentive.
Yeah, carrot. So I didn't do it. And I think it's definitely something I would highly recommend.
So you say you went through a phase of saying yes to all these professional development opportunities. Have you kind of slowed down, or would you recommend a yes phase to people? Or
that's what I'm coming to working on. But yes,
okay.
I think in the beginning, especially, and I almost had zero filter. Do you know what I mean? Where I was just like, okay, I'll do the thing, I'll do that thing, I'll do this thing, and I think that's really good because sometimes if you edit too soon, you might miss out on things.
Right.
You know what I mean? That like could have been really interesting or beneficial.
Totally.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because a lot of times with professional development, you're developing, so you don't really know much about the thing they're presenting on potentially, or maybe you know a lot about it, but you don't know what aspects of it they're going to present on or what it's going to make you think of, or that makes sense.
Yeah. And like, who knows if I will. So I think I told you about the grant I got schooled on. And so like if I do resubmit that, whatever, but that whole thing came out of going to a workshop.
Awesome. The whole idea that you proposed. Yeah.
And even our podcast, because we met in the airport I was coming back from something.
Oh, cool.
And I like, if we had that conversation, just even the fact that we were traveling and got to have that conversation when we were in the headspace of like, I don't know, it's just so different. I just don't know if we could have come up with that if we ran into each other in the corridor, but I was going to collect my kids, or do you know what I mean? So I don't know, having that space to sort of develop professionally, I guess, is like, it's a good thing. So
sure. To be open-minded to new ideas and thinking about how to improve and
totally
whatnot. Yeah.
So tell me, what about you? What works for you with professional development?
So I really liked this particular workshop that I went to, which was the Active Learning and Analytical Chemistry workshop. And one of the best parts that I found about it was that it really was joining a community of people that were all working to improve our teaching. And in particular, on this workshop, we touched base with that community, scheduled as part of, you signed up and you were going to report in periodically for years. So, a semester after the workshop, we touched base and, we were supposed to be working on some small change in our classrooms to improve our active learning in our classrooms. And then we did a little assessment and reported back, and then we got feedback on it. And then a year later, we got a little more feedback. And then,
Wow.
I don't know, maybe a year later, someone came and sat in on one of my classes. So it's been a really ongoing thing of being involved with this community and getting feedback and working on it. So I really feel like it's made a big difference for me. So, so it helped me really move forward, and it also led to some preliminary data that I ended up putting in a grant. So it's been all great. So I guess what the reason I tell this story, I mean, if you are in analytical chemistry, then I highly recommend that particular workshop. But if you're not, I'm thinking about finding a topic of interest, and then, a professional development thing that's particularly interesting to you, and then also that involves continued interaction after the meeting or workshop for a while, so that you join a community and can benefit from it longer term. So I really found that to be valuable.
I love that. And I think, I don't know the actual paper, but apparently there is evidence that, like, when you do professional development, having those follow-on connections can, like, increase the sort of engagement with what, like, the retention of what you learned so much by doing that. And
that
so
makes
that's
sense.
Yeah. And, like, I had a similar experience both with the new faculty workshop with the AAPT and then with Escala, because we did a project afterwards. And it's so good to have those follow-on things keep going.
Yeah.
And I love
so
that you said you use some of it for a grant, because sometimes that's the thing about kind of being in that yes phase to things, is you can't always calculate what the value will be.
It's true.
Right there and then. And so, yeah, it's really cool, especially if you're starting out, just being open to all and everything, because who knows where it'll bring you.
Who knows? Yeah, I definitely didn't know when I signed up for that workshop that any of that. I mean, I had a basic idea we'd report in later, but it ended up being so valuable.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And then I also wanted to say, I also find it great to go to shorter workshops, where it's like an hour or two on campus or something. And I feel like that can be really helpful for, dipping in your toe to some topic you're not as familiar with, or just getting some good ideas, and then you can decide whether to pursue it further or not. So I'm kind of advocating for both ends of the spectrum here. One where you're like joining a community and you're going to work on it for a long time, and then also just exploring with the shorter term things.
Yeah.
I've found both of those really helpful.
Yeah, totally. I've had some really huge experiences just from like an hour thing.
Totally.
For sure.
Totally. Yeah, it just gets your mind going in a new direction and out of the normal loops that you're in,
Totally. Yeah. And it is like, that's the thing. It is so stimulating, even if it was just like, this is rubbish and I hate everything about it. Like, it's kind of stimulating you to think about
totally
what would you do differently or whatever it is. So yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So what are you working on?
So then I think here, I think I'm maybe coming out of the yes phase and like trying to find the balance between energizing or draining. And I had, like, last year, I was supposed to go to this kind of workshop about writing a grant, like just pre-COVID. And it would have been really good to go to, but I was sort of really having like health issues at the time. And I felt so distressed to turn it down. And I was like, oh no one will ever offer me anything again if I do this. And it was just like ridiculous. It's totally fine to say no to some things. And so I think sometimes having that balance between, I don't know, it's really hard to measure, because like, I think I talked about here too, like this semester I decided I'm not doing anything extra because I'm just going to take care of the kids and sort of try and function and not like collapse in a heap. And then it's like, if you cut off too many things, then it's like kind of monotonous, like your job gets, but like even going to those Escala workshops has been really energizing and, exciting. So I think just trying to find that balance. And then I think another thing I'm working on is I'm a complete joiner. Like, I'm like, anytime someone describes something, I'm like, that sounds amazing. Like, I want to do that. And sometimes I just need to stick to what my philosophy is and like not necessarily subscribe to everyone else. You know what I mean? And like, because when you go to a thing and you're like, I'm going to do every one of these things, and it's not really practical.
Right.
And
it's too many things. Yeah.
Yeah. And
interesting.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
And so I think those are the things that I'm kind of, now I'm sort of maybe like when I was the kids were really little, I did absolutely nothing. And then when I first came here, they were still little, but not as, newborn baby little. And then I was like, I'll do everything. And now I need to like equilibrate and maybe be a little more discerning about, okay, this is super. Like you say with the Escala thing, that was an easy yes, because I've had really wonderful experiences before. And
totally,
I know that's like something that really is my jam. And so, yeah. And I think, I mean, I don't want to lose the run of myself, but we're tenure close to tenure. So, maybe it's okay to calm down and not do every single thing.
I can also imagine it kind of going in waves, you like say yes to a whole bunch of things and that's great. And then you kind of figure out which ones you want to do. And then you're like, I can't do any more things. I need to say no to the other ones. And then at some point you're like, what other things are out there? Maybe I should do some more things.
I love that.
Branch out a little more. So
I'm kind of thinking of that almost even as like being digestion time, because sometimes you can't just keep absorbing all the new things. Like there has to be, yeah. So I think that's a thing.
Totally.
But so
that makes a lot of sense.
What about you? What are you working on?
So I'm working on, sometimes I go to professional development workshops and they turn out not to be a good match for me. And I'm realizing that's okay. So we kind of already touched on this. So, I might in the past have been prone to think it's a waste of time if I end up going to one of those and it doesn't end up really feeling like a good match. And it could be, but I think it's helpful to remember that it's a combination of the workshop and me and when I happen to be there and what mindset I'm in. And so there's not anything inherently wrong with the workshop or with me if it's not a good match. That's just how it happened to be right now. Plus, if I just get one idea or get some cool connection while I'm there, then it is beneficial to have gone, so that's good. So I guess I'm working on realizing that not every professional development event will be my cup of tea, and that's okay, and I should still keep going to the ones that look valuable to me at the time that I hear about them, and certainly some of them will end up being really beneficial, and the ones that end up not being a perfect match, that's totally fine. I'll probably get a tidbit out, and like you said, realizing that it's not something I want to do is actually very helpful. So, just realizing that's okay. That doesn't mean I shouldn't go. That's
super. I think that's a really good reflection. And I actually had an experience a few years ago where I went to a workshop and nothing was sitting with me about it. And it was really just no. And it's really interesting because when I was writing this grant about trying to do workshops myself, like it was kind of useful because I was like, not like specifically calling out this workshop, but I was like, here's all the things I will do. And they were all like the opposite of this thing that I didn't like. Course. You know what I mean? And so it was really like, at first I was just like, ugh. And then with a bit of reflection, I was like, what didn't I like? Or why was that so not, And so,
what pieces of that didn't sit with you and would you want to do differently? Yeah, that's very productive.
Right, totally. So I think, it can be for sure. Not if I hadn't done that reflection bit afterwards, I'd just be like, that was a big waste of time. And but it was it did end up being super useful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe another part of it is it's hard to know. Like, obviously we should think about which ones we're going to and not just always go to all of them, even if we don't have time. But to know that, that it's hard to tell until you're there whether it's going to be a good match, and that you might still get something out of it even if it turns out to not be the perfect match, and that you never know, some of them are the perfect match. So that's just kind of realizing that that's how it is, and it's good.
There's something you talk about a lot, and I really appreciate it, and it's the match aspect of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something like, I always just wanted to be like, there's good things and there's bad things, and like I don't. But then it's such a like combination, like, and maybe that workshop I'm thinking of like totally worked for some people, and it was just like not for me at all. And it's super interesting.
And everyone's in different places and hears things in different ways, and it makes sense that there's a variety of formats out there.
And something I've learned from all the professional development things, and this is more of a negative, but I've learned like it really bothers me when people don't respect my time. Do you know what I mean? And so I think in anything I would like to generate, I would like to I always forget that, and then I remember it when it happens to me again, and I'm like,
Sure.
this is really important to me. I should be aware of like finishing at the right time for people, or not like just changing the schedule, or you know what I mean, like all of those things. So I think that is like a negative that is actually a positive, like learning
Sure.
that that's something that's very important to me.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot. Ruth.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.